I'm here with Stefan of Chelsea Grin to talk about Suffer in Hell, out November 11th on 1 RPM. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, perhaps better because I've had a chance to listen to the record, enjoy this record, and now it's time for us to kind of dissect the record, or at least I'm hoping that you're able to shed some light into some of the questions that
Absolutely.
came to my mind as I was listening to it. And the first one is perhaps the most obvious one. When you look at Suffer in Hell and the upcoming Suffer in Heaven, were these two albums created together as one, or do they have different starting points and different creative processes?
So they were originally written as one. And I mean, like when I'm writing, I the more ideas, the merrier, So when it came time to the studio, we pulled up with like 30 tracks about, and in different stages of completion. And so the whole double album thing kind of came when we were getting ready to leave the studio after tracking what we thought was going to be the album. It was like 11 songs. And we were like, we have all this other rad material. We might as well track more. And then we had more, and we were like, wow, this is actually a lot of deathcore, like metal for one person to process at one time, especially given like, nowadays it's about creating more, and getting it out there faster. So we're like, let's cut this into two. So we didn't set out to make two albums, but we just worked really hard, and we were like, it's been a lot of hard work. A lot of these songs deserve to see the light of day. So
how did you decide what tracks would fall under one scope and what tracks would fall under the other?
So there wasn't like a particular concept or theme we were trying to follow. It was more like, how do we make it so that one album doesn't pale in comparison to the other? We wanted to make sure that they both stood their own ground, and so sonically and thematically, they are pretty similar. So it kind of made it more difficult to divide them into two, because it was just based purely on like, okay, which 8 are going to work great together, which 8 are going to keep someone listening from start to finish, and 2 times that, so it was really just about creating two records that were positive listening experiences.
Did you guys have a goal in terms of what you wanted the experience of listening to this record? And I'm not talking about the double album now, I'm talking about specifically Suffer in Hell. Did you guys have a goal of what you wanted that listening experience to be?
Yeah, we really set out to like let people know that we take influence from all across metal, and we wanted it to be sort of a diverse listening experience from start to finish. So, there's no one sound that dominates the whole record. It's a lot of, sounds pulled from different corners of the metal world. And so for us, it was really important to like broadcast, our not necessarily our ability to write whatever or anything we wanted to. It's just that's what we had fun doing. So we wanted to broadcast that, and the challenge was to make sure that there was sort of a core vein running through everything that did still make it Chelsea Grin. So the goal was diversity, but consistency, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and that is not always an easy thing to find that gray area to coexist between those two.
Yeah. I mean, certainly was a challenge. I think, I'm not, I joined the band like 8 years ago, so I wasn't there for everything. But what was cool is the band had been evolving in such a way and incorporating more and more influence that it eventually became like this. Every album represented so many different styles and had so many sounds on it. So it's like every time an album comes out, it just sort of like widens the playing field for me to, do whatever I want and have it still be like conceivably a Chelsea Grin. So it's a challenge to keep it consistent, but I think if you're writing authentically, your truest self is going to shine through whatever you do. So 2 songs may not sound the same, but they're coming from the same mind, the same heart. So it's like they do have that that consistency there. And of course, having Tom be over everything. Tom, is sort of like he's the glue,
When I was listening to this record, even before I press play, I checked the track listing and I see 26 minutes in length. And I'm like, wow, that's short. That's going to be a very short experience. Did you guys think about adding maybe an interlude here and there? Not to just say, oh, it's 30 minutes or it's 35 minutes, but maybe to give the listener a little bit of a break here and there to just kind of catch your breath, or you just wanted to pummel everybody and just give you 26 minutes of consistent heaviness?
We wanted it to just be kind of pummeling, like you said. For us, it's like we didn't want to force anything in there because we felt like, what we had produced, like I keep saying, was just so true to us and so authentic that, and it's like all killer, no filler type situation for us. Every song stands on its own, and every song stands to be somebody's favorite song. So if we were kind of trying to add more to that equation, we didn't want to gamble with like creating a point in time where like there was an opportunity for someone to lose interest or to lose that feeling they have as they're listening through it. So we kind of look at it like, okay, you're going to get, your face stomped in for 26, 27 minutes, and then you get 3 or 4 months of chill time, and then you're going to get your face stomped in again, when the second album comes out. So I mean, I've thought about it a lot. It's been something that's kind of like weighed on me, is like, well, okay, people are getting a short Chelsea Grin album right now. Are they going to be able to keep in mind the fact that they're getting a whole other album, a whole other half to this pretty shortly, So I'm just hoping people do remember that even though this is short and sweet and just like to the point, that it's not the end of it. It's not the story is not told in full by the time you hear the end of this record.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you're going to make people wait for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years until the next record comes around. I mean, so that definitely plays an upside to the fact that the record is a little bit short in length. You mentioned the diversity of sound from track to track, but when you look at this record, maybe outside of the sound, is there a unique identifier that you can say that sets this record apart from other albums?
From like our other albums or other albums,
From like your other, like from previous discography.
It feels like it's really just an amalgamation of everything we've done. So it's everything we've done has brought us to this point, and now the challenge is to one up ourselves, So it does feel like, especially where we were in our lives when we were writing the whole thing, it's more mature. I know people use that for all their albums, but like we've all grown up as people, and so the writing is more mature. It's just sort of like a more realized vision of Chelsea Grin. So, we've come all this way, we've learned everything, and now this is a product of all the lessons we've learned thus far. And the next album will be the same thing. It's going to be us trying to push. When I say next album, I mean like the next album we write and release. It's going to be a similar suit where it's like, okay, this set the bar. For me, it was like Eternal Nightmare, our last record, that sort of did certain things for our career, and so I studied from that, and I was like, okay, this set the bar. This is what we need to achieve, and we need to go beyond this. So I would say that it's just sort of a more fully fleshed out and more honest version of previous records. It's we've just grown, and so we just try to reflect that in everything that we do. So we hope that people we'll be able to hear that, it's just another step forward.
You don't like the word mature, but this is a more mature sounding record. I felt like listening to this album compared to its predecessor maybe had a little bit more of a clear vision of where you guys were starting and where you wanted the journey to take the listener to. Not as chaotic, perhaps. At least that's what I took from it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people, like I've shown a lot of friends the record, and they all feel that way, and it's always interesting to me. It's a relief to hear that because, like I said, no two songs are exactly alike between any, but amongst all 16 of the songs, like every song stands on its own. So I was like, okay, this might seem like it's a little bit all over the place and sporadic for people, but it does seem, and, my listening viewpoint is biased. I can't listen to it the same, and so getting like unfiltered kind of candid reactions from people, it does seem like people feel it's consistent and focused, which is a surprise to me, because when I was writing it, I was like, damn, I just want to write this kind of song, this kind of song, this kind of song, this kind of song. And my worry was people would think it was too wacky. But I think we did a good job of like incorporating ourselves into every song, a consistency that does tie everything together, so that even though it is wacky and all over the place at times, it's still focused.
And the album has great sound quality. I mean, the sound on this record is phenomenal. So maybe that allows a little bit of chaos to feel a little bit more controlled. How much of that sound comes from the preparation and the demoing that you guys do before you going into the studio? And how much of that is a result of the production surrounding the record?
I think that, when you're writing, at least if you have like a certain level of savviness in the studio, like I work in the studio, I run my own studio, so I'm familiar with like executing things up to a certain point that encapsulate the vision we're going for. And so then from pre-pro to completion, it's all about picking a team that's going to help you realize that vision and make it come true. So like I'll write a song, and if it didn't sound a certain way, then it wouldn't, the song wouldn't have the same effect. So it's really important to us to find a team. So we worked with Zach Jones to produce and engineer the record, and he was a pleasure to work with. And then we had Jeff Dunn mix and master it. And we've worked with Jeff in the past. Jeff's a really great friend of mine. And we were all like, hey, Jeff is going to be the guy that can sonically capture what we're trying to elicit, instrumentally. And so, it's a huge part of it. I mean, if the mix was, not that there's different mixes that wouldn't serve the album justice, but it's like if the mix was different, it wouldn't, project that same image that we want it to. So it's really massive. And I would say that, the team we had was super important in like, helping us with ideas and thus like creating, we were all so on the same page. We spent so much time together that they had a clear vision of what we wanted.
Sorry about this. I'm having a coughing fit as you're talking.
No, I hope you're all good.
Yeah, no. I just had some popcorn, and I think some of them got stuck somewhere.
You got a little flecks of popcorn down there. But yeah. I mean, they were a vastly important part of this whole process.
So I look at this album and I see the atmosphere that you guys create, the sound experience that you guys created, and then the titles of the tracks as the new axis of evil. Do you see this conjunction of these three factors and how important they are in the overall takeaway that this record will give the listener?
Yeah, well, I'm really appreciative that you said that, because for us, it's not just like business as usual. We didn't want to have artwork that was similar to artwork we've had in the past. We didn't want to have song titles that were just like an iteration of what we've done in the past. It was very much every face of this, huge, body of work needs to present like, this is a new era. This is a step in a different direction, hopefully upward, but a step in a different direction regardless. So, it's crucial if you want people to understand that it's, an evolution, then every bit of the release needs to reflect that. So, it was a big part of our, it was at the forefront of our minds when we were choosing, like I said, artwork, like you said, song titles, album titles, so on and so forth. It was just, we wanted everything to be like, oh, okay, this isn't the Chelsea Grin that we've been listening to for 15 years.
When you look at the guitar sound and you see some of the more technical elements that you guys added to the overall drive, helps give the song's texture, but is that something that it was you guys thinking, okay, we need to once again evolve, we need to grow, and this is an area where we can do that without affecting too much of the DNA of the band? Or it was more of an organic process of where these songs end up going?
It's a really organic process. I mean, I think that previous Chelsea Grin, especially like the time we had Jason Richardson with us, it set this standard of like, okay, this band has the ability for certain technicality. And so like I was saying before, all the sounds the band had made previously led up to like this huge box of toys that we could pull from and like throw at this album, and it still sound like Chelsea Grin. So I think there is sort of a subconscious pressure to maintain some sense of technicality, but like I've just kind of internalized that at this point. So when I'm writing, it's completely organic. You know, it's not, I don't set out to write any song and say, hey, this song needs to have craziness on the guitars, this song needs to have craziness on the drums, it needs to have X, Y, and Z. It's more like I start the song and then it just evolves naturally. And yeah, so that there's not like a pressure there. I think it just flows organically, as you said.
Were the vocals the same way? Because I felt like the vocal performance all around on this album was very organic. It felt like the natural output to the music that you guys had created. Was that the same process?
Yeah, I mean, I know that Tom has so many lyrics written at any given time, and so it's kind of up to him to decide what's going to suit best. And this was Tom's first chance to really just be himself on a record with us. The last one, he came in, you know, midway through the recording process, and we kind of all had to work together to finish the product. But on this one, we were like, hey, just do what feels right. And he's so good at like playing for the part. You know, he knows what to do for Chelsea Grin, and I think that really shows in this. He knew how to not just put lyrics together, but the delivery of everything. He knew exactly how to serve the sound we presented him instrumentally in the best way. So I think it was pretty organic for him. You know, there was a lot of just like, all right, I'm gonna hit it, and then he would hit it, and we'd be like, damn, that's awesome. Yeah, keep it up, just keep going, you're on a rip. So yeah, it was similar with vocals.
You guys have Trevor on one of the tracks. It must be a bittersweet experience to have that song on this record. When you look back at that track, at his performance, what stands in your mind about it?
I think really the interaction we were able to have with Trevor surrounding his, you know, featuring on the track. He was just so gracious and so amazing about it, and he was just so Trevor about it. You know, he was excited and eager, and like he just wanted the song to turn out as best as it could. And so for me, it's really reflecting on the interaction I was able to have with Trevor during that time. You know, listening to the song back, it's always kind of a kick to the chest to hear that part, you know, but it's a positive reflection. It was just one more thing that Trevor would do to affect our lives in a positive way, to like, you know, he didn't realize he was doing it, but like to help us realize we're on the right path, we're doing the right thing, we're working with the right people, we've got this amazing circuit of friends, and Trevor is just really like validating all of this for us by being the best dude ever, and like showing us that you can be an icon and still be down to earth and gracious and grateful, and like that quality of a person, you know. So for me, it's kind of reflecting on the whole experience of like getting the feature and you know, just sharing that with him.
Yeah, one of a kind, really, like one of a kind kind dude, like seriously.
Absolutely.
When you look back at the experience of not just creating Suffer in Hell, but Suffer in Heaven, do you look back as a challenging experience or a growing and maturing experience, or maybe all of it?
Yeah, I would say it's a bit of both. I mean, it hasn't been 4 years because we were just taking it easy, you know, and like kicking back on the beach somewhere. It was the most arduous record creating process I've ever been a part of. It's the most arduous record making process that any of my friends have been a part of, really. It's like the whole process was just wild, full of obstacles and barriers from in different forms. And that's not like a complaint. It's like it all sort of motivated us to work really hard, and you know, every time we'd face a setback, it was like, oh shit, woe is me. It was like, okay, we need to compensate for the setback by just going that much harder in the creation of this. So it was a lot of fun. Like, I love writing. It's always a blast. I love to travel while I write. I love to, like, you know, immerse myself in so much life when I'm writing music, just to take inspiration from it. So the process of writing is beautiful. It's just like my favorite thing ever. It's, if I could just write music and not do anything else in this industry, that would be fine by me. But you know, it's like fair share of trials and tribulations through that path. And then once it was time to like solidify it, record it and everything, it was a whole other set of trials and tribulations. So it was equal parts stress and joy.
We talked about the axis of evil for Suffer in Hell. Is there a same axis of evil alive and well when it comes to Suffer in Heaven?
Yeah. I think the two albums are similar in a sense that they just pummel you with a wide variety of sounds from metal throughout. And there's sounds on Suffer in Heaven and Suffer in Hell that like you don't see on the other. Like every song, like I said, sort of stands for itself and has its own vision and like message and sound to it. So I think you can expect a really similar experience from Suffer in Heaven. I will say, I think most of like my favorite tracks, a few of my favorite tracks are on Suffer in Heaven. So I'm excited for Suffer in Hell to come out because a couple of my favorites are on there too. But I'm like, damn, I just want them to hear, now that we're so close to Suffer in Hell, it's like my appetite cannot be satiated. I want people to hear Suffer in Heaven now. And Suffer in Hell's not even out for another 4 days. I mean, I don't know by the time this airs, but like, you know, they're similar in a lot of ways. I mean, there's no like, you'll have the same experience listening to the second one. In my mind, it might just be a little more more amplified of an experience, but.
Well, this one is kind of going to set the bar, or at least it's going to set the expectations for the other one to deliver. So that on that basis alone is going to make the follow-up a little bit more impactful, because this one almost feels like a little bit of that first season that ends on a cliffhanger, and then you can't wait for that second season to come back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of what we were hoping people would feel, is that they leave off wanting more.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what you always want from an album. I mean, there's wanting more in like an unsatisfied way, but I think there's wanting more in like it gets you so stoked that you just naturally want more, and that's what we're hoping people experience listening to Suffer in Hell.
One last question for you. When you look at the genre of deathcore, a lot of the genre becomes what the bands within the genre create with it and from it, and evolve within it. Where do you see that genre going, and where do you see the evolution within that genre? What do you think is the most important thing that has changed over the last 8 years, for example?
I think that deathcore bands are realizing that we're sort of like, how do I put this? It's like we're like Grand Central Station, you know, and there's all these lines that are filtering through us. And it's not like, you know, deathcore's in the world of metal, a newer genre, right? But like, it's as if it's as if the blood of every other subgenre of metal at some point passes through deathcore. So like deathcore can do anything, it can be anything. And there's staples of it, you know, like breakdowns and the vocals and so on and so forth. But like, the world is your oyster when you play in a deathcore band. You can do whatever you want. You can reflect whatever sounds you want. And I think a lot of bands are realizing that lately. Like, you know, like Lorna Shore has their own sound. And obviously they've taken influence from artists they love in the past. But like Lorna Shore, people categorize under deathcore, but it's so many things brought into one. Like bands like Shadow of Intent, it's a very metal band. Like they're more toward death metal, but they take influence from everywhere. And now, you know, they're like a powerhouse of deathcore. Brand of Sacrifice is similar. Like these up and coming bands are realizing that like we're just sitting in a big huge sandbox where you can build whatever you want to do, and that's sort of a cool thing about the evolution of deathcore. I think back in the day when I was first getting into the genre, a lot of deathcore sort of had similar goals and sounded the same. Not like, oh, I can't tell this artist from this artist, but like they all incorporated the same things. And as it's evolving, it's like the boundaries of what makes something deathcore are expanding. And I think that's really exciting, especially, you know, like I love all metal. I want to be able to write whatever I want and have it still be my band, have it still be you know, what people associate my band with. And so it's kind of a freeing thing. And I think that's really badass. It's a cool progression for any genre to experience that.
So do you think the success that these bands, including Chelsea Grin, have had, has the success has allowed the genre to evolve, or the evolution of the genre is what brought the success?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think that it's probably a little bit of both, but I'm leaning toward the evolution of the genre has bred success. So, you know, as you incorporate more sound, you're going to reach more ears, you know, you're going to please more palates, musical palates, you know. So I think that deathcore's ability to sort of like chameleon amongst other genres is what is making it more and more popular. But also I do think that, you know, the more successful these bands get, the more doors open for them and the more ability they have to write whatever they want. So, you know, there's some relationship between the two.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the chicken or the egg, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, 100%.
In terms of what came first. So I totally get it. Stefan, thank you very much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you about this record. I'm looking forward to the follow-up, and I'm looking forward to another conversation when that album is about to hit.
Hey, yeah, you just let me know. I'll be there. I'm happy to talk about it anytime.
All right, man. It's been a blast. Take care. All the best with the release.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good one.